Name of the book REHAM Khan, Chapter 5. It was the summer of 1995. Sahir and I had barely begun settling down in the port town of Gould when Dr. Rahman announced he wanted to resign and move to Australia. Although the hospital accommodation didn't really look like a home, it was all Sahir and I had. I had started working as an apprentice at a local hair salon as part of a program for adults returning to education or training. The job gave me respite from the shouting and swearing at home and allowed me a chance to be around other women. I loved even the simple joy of buying a pizza slice from the local co-op for lunch. The hairdressing wasn't really my cup of tea, but listening to people was. While washing their hair, I would realize that we all have the same dreams and fears, regardless of our skin colors or origin. All the mothers, daughters, and wives had issues I was familiar with. I especially enjoyed looking after our elderly clients. One of the younger girls would frequently and rather casually mention how her boyfriend would be physically abusive. This 17-year-old would turn up for work with a bruised eye. I was shocked to find that even girls in England, with rights given to them by law and society, would choose to live with abuse. I had thought I had thought being a punching bag was limited only to women in our culture. There are many who still believe that it is all safe and fair for women living in the West. I chose to seal my lips most nights while the doctor chose to assert his manliness. He had taken on the position of locum consultant. He was 36 years old of age with a 1-year-old son. He had no money in the bank, no property, and no right to remain indefinitely in the UK. His much younger wife was still looking young and learning a new skill. She had settled well into life in the UK. Nothing fazed her. Soon she would be able to get a job and maybe even another man. She knew his insecurity by now, understood the demons inside him. He continually starved himself to maintain a slim physique. And little did he know that his wife only wanted a smile, not a 32-inch waistline. I didn't care that the house was teeny compared to my parents' home. I didn't care if I hardly had any clothes. I had Sahir. We were happy to be playing with the wildflowers in the hospital grounds. One night Ajaz snapped against and grabbed me by the throat. He dragged me through the entrance corridor and slammed me against the glass sandwood door. I felt the chain of the door dig into my head. He had blood in his eyes as he tried to choke me. I let out a loud scream so he would stop. I knew there was a doctor on call saying, staying next door. It worked. He stopped immediately. The following morning, the elderly Sri Lankan doctor from next door walked over to our Nissan as I took Sahir out of his car seat. He tried to talk to me about this and that, but I could tell he just wanted to give me an opportunity to ask for help. There was concern and kindness in his eyes. However, instead of confiding in him, I just felt embarrassed to the core. It wasn't just him who knew my husband's family were also very familiar with their son's temper tantrums. During Ramadan, my sister-in-law and her daughter had stayed with us. I loved spending time with my in-laws. Some of my best memories are of holidays with my sister-in-law, brother-in-law, and their kids. They would make fun of Ajaz's weird habits. Having them around made life easier. We would privately joke about how menacing he looked in his trench coat, peering out of the windows to pounce on us if we were coming back home. Although they made fun of his controlling behavior, they also secretly feared I would leave him or tell the world about him. His his prowling, controlling personality was suffocating for his family, but they did not have to live with him or listen to him on a daily basis, so they never really intervened. However, I did overhear them trying to talk sense into him a few times, emphasizing that he needed to control his anger and he gentler with his wife and kid. My sister-in-law had given a lot of liberty to her only daughter after her own divorce empath- and could empathize with me. I caught her reading my letters to my mother. She probably thought that I would be voicing my unhappiness to my family, but I had not confided in anyone. It was just too embarrassing, and more importantly, I thought it was all my fault. I was not good enough, not competent enough, and not beautiful enough. I always provoked him to lose his temper by not being perfect or perfectly behaved. I went along with all his trash behavior, hoping that he would find the peace and happiness he desired. Then, before I knew it, we were moving to Australia, a place far too big and far too new for the 23-year-old. I had become accustomed to Yorkshire's warm politeness and helpful demeanor with the familiar love at the end of every other sentence. Don't you worry, love, the hospital porters and workers would say to me whenever I wanted something done. After that, handling the coarseness of Western Australia was difficult. On my first day in Perth, I answered the door to find a man in just a vest and shorts. Is this number one? There was no hello or good morning. I replied politely that it was, and he thought it a washing machine, and he brought in a washing machine. As I held the door open for him, he bumped into a pillar and rather rudely remarked, "Dumb place to put a pillar," before showing the still packaged washing machine off a trolley and leaving it in the middle of the hallway. I heard myself say, "Will you not take it to the laundry room for me?" "Nah," the man responded blithely. "So you are just going to leave it here?" I protested feebly. "Will I have to install it myself? I am not familiar with these." "It is dead easy. Don't be dumber," the man replied, unmoved by my concern. I stared at him in disbelief and quietly signed the clipboard he pushed in my direction. In fact, Western Australia remind me of Pakistan. The man stared and his state agent used racial terms to describe the areas. The odd thing was there were a lot of British expats in Perth, but rather seemed to have somehow forgotten British political correctness. and I clearly was not the only one conscious of this Western Australian bluntness. The morning TV shows would teach etiquette for businessmen wishing to make progress when meeting delegations from Asian countries, clearly aware of a certain regional deficiency. However, as time passed, I discovered that the bluntness was just had packaging for very friendly people. They did not have the manners of the British, but at least you know exactly where you stood. As if the hot, blistering sunshine and brashness were not enough, my husband had become even more violent. He now had a consultant position, and the much sought after immigration was only weeks away, but it didn't improve his behavior at all. Any sound from Sahir in the night would be met with a hysterical reaction. Whenever he was disturbed, Ajaz would jump on the bed, fists clenched. The image of that naked man threatening to hit the toddler became imprinted in my mind. I would escape to the spare room with Sire and lock it. We could not come out until after he had left for work in the morning. Once Sahir and I stayed out of his sight in the spare room for 2 whole days. But at the time alone was for bubble bath, singing bananas in pajamas and taking long walks to the local park. The corporate was our art, then I would put a rug under it and cover the wheelie bins with paper to use them as easels. We would spend the afternoons rolling our parathas, layered puffy bread pastry. I made the most of this time with the only source of happiness in my life, my son. As events went by, I accidentally managed to forge a friendship that would last a lifetime. There were very few Pakistani family in Perth and very few Pakistani doctors, but we managed to meet a couple who were extremely hospitable towards us. The husband was from Haripur, Hazara, which we knew very well. He was jobless and took his frustration out on the family. The wife was a highly competent homemaker. She was an excellent cook and stitched beautifully. We somehow connected and became very good friends in a very short space of time. She reintroduced me to the cinema, beginning by dragging me to the Bollywood blockbuster Dilwale Dulhan Leke Jayenge. The rest of the 6 months or so in Perth were spent enjoying leisurely barbecues while singing DDLJ songs together. Surprisingly, Ajaz allowed this friendship to continue. Perhaps Mahin appeared benign enough to him, but I think the reason we connected was that we both shared a desire to live life on our own terms. After years of putting up with a husband who did not deserve her love, loyalty, or intelligence, she was forced to divorce him. She caught him stealing her bank cards and then marrying another woman while on holiday in Pakistan. She was still heartbroken when this small, ugly, and unfaithful man dished her, but life had decided to reward her for her tolerance. After leaving him, Mahin completed a master's in international relations and went on to become a diplomat. She also found the love she had only seen on screen for much of her life, bringing this gorgeous new husband over to Pakistan with her years later. when we were up once more after 20 years. She was one of the few people to encourage me to get married again. Although that would be the last time I would see her, the laughs we shared during those extremely rough months in Perth will always be cherished memories. 1995 was an eventful and news-heavy year. One story dominating the news, even in Australia, was the marriage of a very young Jewish heiress to a former Pakistani cricketer. The middle-aged man in question was vaguely familiar to me. He was the hero of my husband's generation. My husband would even copy his hairstyle and mannerisms, as did many of his peers. The journalist in me was surprised at the coverage this was getting in the international press. There were always so many rich society weddings in the UK after all. Perhaps it was because the man in question was about to launch a political career. Though he had been admired by countless Pakistanis, I had never paid much attention to Imran Khan. I remembered that his bachelor status had been the topic of iconic comedy shows like 50-50 and interviews on TV. I would end up in heated debates with older Pakistani men in our circle as we sat watching these interviews of their hero Imran Khan came across as an arrogant, rude, and rather ill-mannered man. Even back then, I disliked this attitude of arrogance and female subjugation. I could certainly relate to the young girl marrying this domineering older man. Imran Khan came across as everything I detested in a man, yet he was everything men like my husband aspired to be. A close friend even gifted me an Imran Khan coffee table book in an effort to convert me. I passed it on without reading it. Perhaps this was a mistake. Reading up on people who do not appeal to you can come in handy later in life. If 1995 was the year of the marriage that would influence Pakistani politics and culture for more than 20 years, the following year would be the year of the royal divorces that would modernize the face of the British monarchy forever. The most photographed woman in the world, Princess Diana, showed that a perfectly obedient woman was not the ideal anymore. She spoke up, she broke her dignified, ladylike silence, she broke the royal rules. It was not only the establishment that hated her for speaking up. Diana's interview to Martin Bashir drew sharp criticism from men around me. Some particularly disgusting remarks came from my psychiatrist husband, who had a habit of describing everyone as borderline personality disorder in the first meeting before moving on to the labeling them bipolar in subsequent meetings. His tempered tour of psychiatrist terminology ended there. In her interview, Diana maintained that she believed someone had to go out and love people. She was touching the hearts of everyone she met, seemingly desperate to fill her loneliness and compensate for the love she had been deprived of. Later that year, we would all see that going out and loving people in need was not allowed, but breaking someone else's marriage was perfectly permissible. The Spice Girls entered our lives that year too, and we were introduced to the concept of girl power. They urged us to spice up our lives. They were real life, powerful puff girls, each exuding their individuality and power. You could sporty, posh, scary, a baby, or even ginger, and that was just fine. The stage was big enough for all of them. The message was clear to women all over the world. If you wanna be any lover, you have gotta get with my friends. We watched, sang, and were unknowingly influenced by these sublime messages of female improvement. As the friendship with Mahin progressed, our immigration application was nearing acceptance. The whole point of moving to Australia was to get permanent residency and stability, or so it was told. But but as the days passed and Ajaz's violent tantrums increased, he suddenly let slip that in the event of a breakdown of a relationship, imagination was granted to the dependent partner at the time of the application. I did not know where he had heard this, but the idea made my husband so nervous that he resigned unexpectedly. We were on flight back to the UK within a year. After a month of respite, the violence escalated again. My husband would regularly pin me down in bed with a kind of wrestling of the legs and mock me to move. A week later, I discovered the cause of this nervousness. He had applied for a giant mortgage, apparently for tax purpose, and needed my signature. Just the idea of a joint mortgage had sent my husband on a violent spree. He would try to mark his territory forcefully at night and would want my limbs in bed just for the fun of it in the morning, and the verbal attacks became pretty much continuous. In utter despair, I finally picked up the phone and confided in my mother. She was angry but offered no solution other than to handle him smartly. I couldn't explain to her that you can't handle abuse smartly. She was outraged but never said, "Come home to me." She insisted it was my fault from day one for being his personal maid and cooking and cleaning like a slave. My mother, bless her soul, had no idea how the rest of the world lived. My lifestyle was alien to her. She was the elder daughter of an affluent family. Even after marriage, she was treated like a princess. My father was the perfect gentleman he earned, and his wife chose how to spend, which is probably why he did so well in his life. Most women who are given responsibility invest money well and never have to resort to retail therapy to settle scores with the husband. I had not been given any responsibility. I had not asked for a house and was not included in any of the decision making. One day I was driven to a house in North Ferriby Hull, which the doctor had chosen with the secretary. It was a four-bedroom detached house. It was bought for around 1 lakh in pound in Upmaker area, but needed a lot of repair. We moved into the house and immediately started on extensive repair work. I was miserable, and the only joy in my life was Sahir. As he was nearing school age, I planned another pregnancy. I kept hoping parenthood would calm Ajaz down and that the marriage would work. After all, I also had no courage to leave him. My mother had clearly told me that she would not support any such step. With no friends or family, the 23-year-old decided to make the best of a bad situation. Before long, I was pregnant again, and it worked for a while. I just calmed down, not only during the pregnancy, but even for a little while after it. And very soon, I would have another beautiful little companion to bring me joy in his bleak world. I remember how Sahir and I had waited for his baby sister. Her pregnancy had followed a rather turbulent couple of years with his father. Even getting pregnant a second time did not calm the monster in my husband entirely. A compliment to the hostess by a guest could still have bruising consequences. I remember the full term pregnant woman trying to protect her bump from anything he could get his hands on. On one occasion, a massive bunch of keys was hurled at me with so much force that the resulting bruise covered much of my right thigh. I took a long time to fade away, but its presence did at least serve as a reminder to him and limited further incidents. Through the pregnancy, the baby hardly moved. It was a sign of the quiet, undemanding child that would soon arrive. By the time the day finally came around, I had put my foot down and did know to guess. I didn't want any elderly guest to look after this time. The pain started in the early morning, and Ajaz, tormented by the thought of another long labor last time, refused to take me to hospital until I was certain it was time. He looked at me calmly, applying my eyeliner, and said, "Women don't calmly put on makeup when it is a real thing. They scream the house down. It must be just Braxton Hicks." He instead took me to DIY store to take my mind off things as the pains increased. I pleaded with him to take back home at least for the next few hours. I was trying everything in the book to breathe away the pain. At one point, I had my head resting on the step of the staircase with me doubled over the pain as I tried to breathe away the pain. Ejaz returned from his squash game and came up to say that Roger was asking if we could join them for the squash club dinner on Thursday. I looked up at him and snarled, "It looks like I am being a baby, so no, we cannot join them on Thursday. And if I am not having a baby right now, chances are I will be in labor by Thursday." Ejaz was not used to me being so forceful. It seemed to do the trick. He agreed to take me to the hospital, but not without taking a pit stop at the local McDonald's. He remembered feeling very hungry and having a mediocre sandwich at last time I was in labor. As he turned around to ask me what I would have, I burst into a wait and cried, "Please take me to the hospital. It's time." I felt the tears rushing out of my eyes amid the tearing pain and begged him. Poor Sahir peered worriedly through his round glasses as this madness played out in front of him. It took ages to get to Hull Princess Royal Hospital from our home in North Ferriby, which was at the other end of the city. Ajaz dropped me off at reception while he went to park the car. As I stood in the reception area, the shift was changing. They asked me to wait, but I had to shout, "Someone please help me." I stood there and wailed helplessly, unable to sit or walk. There was no time to wait. As the midwife helped me onto the relief table, I asked for gas and air. "There isn't any time for that now, my dear," she replied. Rida arrived within 5 minutes of me being taken to the room. She cried as if in protest as she arrived into this world and continued loudly for a solid 15 minutes. Really is a child so perfect at birth. She had no puffiness and looked simply beautiful. Sire entered the room with an uneaten Happy Meal still in his hand, looking even more worried, while the overgrown kid, claiming to be the father, followed sheepishly behind. Right from day one, Sire was involved in helping me look after his new baby sister, and he was a natural. He did not have a jealous bone in his body. It was as if he realized his responsibility to his family from the start. His sisters would never feel the absence of a father figure. I didn't know what the future held, of course, but I knew Sahir would always be there to help sort out my issues. Indeed, before long, I would be watching him sort everything for them, from schooling to traveling arrangements. Sahir shaped himself into the perfect big brother. This behavior extended to family and friends as well. They would seek him out for everything from exam help and career guidance to emotional support. It all started with Riza. Unlike Sahir, Rida hardly cried or fidgeted. She was a very easy to handle baby as long as she was fed and warm. She was happy and slept for long periods of time. I made rapid progress on the repairs and decoration of the house, and my baby slept peacefully through it all. Rida was also the perfect model. I would spend the day putting her in pretty frocks and taking photos. For Sahir and I, our world was complete. Even Ajaz loved his father, showing off his rather light-skinned baby girl with auburn curly ringlets. One day, only a few months after the birth, I took the car seat out with Rida still strapped in it, sleeping peacefully. I went upstairs to the bathroom. When I came back downstairs, I saw that Rida was not in the car seat. I panicked, but then I saw her in Sair's arms. He was sitting on the sofa like a pro, with the baby cradled carefully as he confidently fed her water from her bottle. I took a picture of it to remind them both when they were older, but it was hardly necessary. He made sure we received regular reminders that he would always look out for his family. Ironically, I now believe that pictures really tell a story accurately. Years later, a young journalist who was interested in my story would ask to see albums from my marriage. His first reaction was, "You look happy. It looks like a good, happy family." "It was meant to look like a happy family," I replied. The perfect bay trees outside the front door and the hand lamp floor length curtains hid a horrible secret. The boy who'd always be praised for his intelligence came from a place where he had always been ridiculed for being a duffer. He was physically abused day after day and meal after meal for any reason. Sometimes it was for something silly as not finishing his bread. I, I spent my days and nights protesting Sahib from violent abuse, Ajaz anger and aggression had increased once more. It was as if this was not even his own son. With the birth of Rida, Sahir was no longer allowed to come into the bedroom. The child could come around in early in the morning looking for his mum, only to be hit, shouted at, and chased back out. Meal times were horrific, with forced being forced down the poor 4-year-old's throat. It had strict instruction the child must have full fried egg with 2 slices of bread for breakfast and at least one whole pita bread with curry at mealtimes. Sire would often throw up when force-fed, and it would lead him to being dragged by the hair and smacked in blind rage. It was assumed that the child was throwing up on purpose. Any remaining leftovers on the plate would trigger fresh abuse. On one occasion, I put a plate with some scraps of eggs while into the sink. Ajaz shouted at me, took the camera out, and took a photograph of this horrible crime. One of the main ways of forcing Syed to finish his food was dragging him into the coat cupboard and locking him in the dark while setting the burglar alarm off. The minute longer bleeping sounds before the main alarm went off would be coupled with the child's screams and my pleading to let him out. Ejaz would put his hand on the handle and shove me away when I would try to step in to stop this madness. Sahib became terrified of the burglar alarm and he remained phobic of loud sounds for many years. We all just stayed out of the way for the most part, and I tried to make sure we followed the rules. The image of Saib being dragged up the stairs by his shiny, dark, straight hair will always torture me. I would try to intervene, and Ejaz would turn on me. Sahir was so terrorized during the day that he started getting night terrors. It was somehow not understood by the psychiatrist that the child was sleepwalking and not sneaking out of bed at night to play games. I would find him out of his bed in the middle of the night, crying hysterically and banging his hands on the windows. He was clearly fast asleep and wouldn't recognize me. Ajaz would storm in and slap the child repeatedly to wake him up. I ended up sleeping on the floor next to Sahir's bed to prevent these violent incidents. Most of our lives were spent protecting each other while Rida learned to stay hidden in her room away from any provocation. We would be asked what we wanted to eat, but giving the wrong answer would result in an hour-long lecture on how I was corrupting the children by getting them used to Western food. There was a deep hatred of anything associated with the white or Western culture. I was pronounced a bad mother serving panic or vegetarian sausage to the kids was deemed serious corruption and deviation from Eastern traditions. Consequently, alcohol consumption for the patriarch of the house did not fall onto the list of corrupting evil practices. Somehow, McDonald's also slipped through the net of haram Western food, net of haram Western food. If we so much as mentioned anything else, the furious yet hilarious outbursts could begin. Ironically, I had a problem with McDonald's myself as it did not serve halal meat, but Ajaz insisted on it. It was the only way he felt Sahir would put on weight. On one occasion, Sahir simply said that he preferred a margarita pizza, which resulted in Ajaz suddenly rolling down his window and howling at passerby at the top of his voice. मैं पिज्जा नहीं खाऊंगा. I will not eat pizza. It certainly was not funny at the time, but recalling these eccentricities and childish outbursts would eventually become a source of amusement for us. A grown-up man behaving like a baby was shocking and very embarrassing at the time, but finding amusement in the worst memories may be the best way to move on. Ironically, my kids grew up to be more attached to our culture and tradition than most kids from Pakistani villages. In our house, there has to be an aloo gosht cooked regularly, and a month without golgappas or barfi would mean employment of a complex system of couriers. The children are fluent in Urdu and understand Pashto and Punjabi and never made an active effort. You don't have to force tradition down someone's throat. Let them fall in love with heritage themselves. When Ejaz was not shouting and screaming, he reminding me a lot of Mr. Bean. He was that sort of character. I recalled how infrequently he laughed with me, but in retrospect, he did a lot of laughable things. In our new house, he had insisted on me sewing in blackout curtain behind the heavy dark blue velvet curtains. The room was pitch black. This would lead to a few very amusing incidents. With Rida's arrival, I had less time on my hands to tidy up wardrobes every day. One day, Ajaz at midday, called me up at midday and said, I will be home at 20 minutes. Grab a pair of black shoes and stand at the gate. I'm running late. I was puzzled and did as was told. As I handed him the shoes through the car window, he looked up at me with a sheepish smile. He told me that he had been sitting in his ward with the nurses in his typical casual style, with his legs stretched out in front of him. Ejaz was fidgety and would find it difficult. Sorry for electric failure. I recalled how infrequently he laughed with me, but in retrospect, he did a lot of laughable things. In our new house, he had insisted on me sewing in blackout curtains behind the heavy dark blue velvet curtains. The room was pitch black. This would lead to a few very amusing incidents. With Dirida's arrival, I had less time on my hands to tidy up the wardrobe every day. One day, Ajaz called me up at midday and said, I will be home in 20 minutes. Grab a pair of black shoes and stand on the gate. I'm running out time. I was puzzled and did as was told. As I handed him the shoes through the car window, he looked up at me with a sheepish smile. He told me that he had been sitting in his ward with the nurses in his typical casual style, with his legs stretched out in front of him. Ajaz was fidgety and would find it difficult to focus in meetings. About halfway into his particular meeting, he had noticed that he had one black and one brown shoe on. The nurses had been smirking but had not pointed it out. Although he was smiling in embarrassment at the time, he later blamed his absent-mindedness on me. The bizarre incident was a part of his daily routine, but like the nurses, we thought it best not to laugh at these idiocies outright. One of the phobia Ajaz had developed was the fear of being burgled. I was constantly being scolded for not removing the car's radio pan panel. Every time I parked, even inside the school, I would remove it and either put in under the seat in the happy bag or in the nappy bag. During his lunch break one day, Ajaz decided to make a quick shopping trip to the town center. Having found a parking spot, he took off the radio panel and took it with him, but already in his hand were used tissues and a cigarette pack, which he threw into the rubbish bin in the shopping center. As soon as he did so, he realized he had thrown in the radio panel along with the rubbish. Public bins in England are often fixed to the ground and closed from the top with narrow slots on all four sides, similar to a letterbox. Homeless tramps can occasionally be seen putting their arms inside the reach for leftover chips and cigarettes. There in the middle of the city center, the consultant doctor in a suit was caught with his arm stuck deep in the bin for his rather gossipy manager. On another occasion, during his time as an illegal immigrant to the US, he was pulled over by the police for running a red light. Ajaz pleaded and a bribe was agreed upon. The officer told him to walk over to the police car and throw $100 bill through the rolled down back window of the vehicle. Ajaz, thinking he could outsmart the police, threw in a $1 bill instead and drove off feeling very happy with himself. A week later, the same police officer pulled him over and gave him a ticket for over $400. Calling our marriage mismatch is perhaps an underestimate. The problem was never really his unawareness and coarseness. It was that he was consumed by an inefficiency complex because of his age, looks, and lack of status. These things have never bothered me. A kind word is worth too much more than a diamond solitaire. Winning a woman's heart take only a smile, a warm hand, or a rose. Ajaz needed Mrs. Raymond to show to the world just live he needed two brand new Mercedes Benz with personalized number plates. This scared little boy had been deprived of a further have been deprived of a father who loved him unconditionally and a mother who would uh, protect him. Ajaz was not taught love. He never understood that he should have married a woman he could connect with, perhaps someone of his own age group who spoke on his language. Within a year of birth, I found I was pregnant again. It would be my only unplanned pregnancy. It was medically categorized threatened right from the start. My body had not had the rest it needed, and I was losing weight rapidly. The daily violence towards Sahir and the added responsibility of another baby had taken a toll. As I approached the fifth month, I started getting extremely exhausted, and there was some bleeding. One day, I just found me laying down in the afternoon and told me clearly that this was not a household where women retired in the afternoons to rest, but returning to the grueling schedule just resulted in more bleeding. The following week, my doctor advised me to not carry heavy objects and to take complete rest. When I showed this to my husband, he decided we could all take the next flight to Pakistan. When we landed in Pakistan, I discovered that Ajaz had made plans to take his entire extended family to the hilly resort of Nathia Gali for a holiday. I asked my brother and sister to drop by. It was a lovely time of broad games and laughter, which Ajaz typically refused to join in with. But there was a problem. In England, I would had only my own to to look after, but here I was the hostess to four families. Rida was not familiar with the family, and since there were no carpeted areas, I also ended up carrying her the whole time. One evening, we all ended up sharing one room as the booking had been messed up. In the middle of the night, Sai had a night terror again, and I cried to quickly calm both my children so the others would not be disturbed. A few minutes later, I felt a slight jab in my abdomen. I got up to use the toilet. As soon as I entered the bathroom, my waters broke violently. I stumbled out, called my husband, and explained what had happened. He just told me to go back to sleep. I sat back on my bed and wondered what to do. I was scared and started sobbing. My brother-in-law heard and asked what was the matter. I told him what had happened. He shook my husband awake and admonished him for telling me to go back to sleep. A car was arranged to take me to Ahmedabad. 2 days later, I miscarried my baby at 5 months. It took me years to get over that. I had just lost a baby. No one understood and no one cared. The most cruel comments came from other women. My mother-in-law declared that it was my fault for losing a baby boy. They felt I had been irresponsible and careless. My singing on holiday was declared to be the reason by my sister-in-law. As the years went by, even Ajaz noticed that my personality had changed. I had lost the bounce. I hardly spoke anymore. I suppose I had given up my expecting anything from anyone. My smile had faded. I had applied to Hull University for a degree in sociology and managed to get a place on the course. The female tutor had taken one look at me, judged me by my appearance, and asked me for an easy on a book on feminism by Alison Jagger. I read the entire book and completed the assignment in 2 days. She was taken aback by my ability. However, Ejaz said he would not allow me to go to university. It had recently had my hair cut very short. When he saw the picture on my student card, he flew into a rage. He took the car keys from me and snapped the debit card he had given me in behalf. I tried to defy him, but there was no way of financing the course. I remember getting in touch with the career advice lines and being told that if I could prove I was separated and not a dependent, I would perhaps get help with tuition fee. I vividly remember the last £2 coin I used to take the bus from the home from Hull University. It was raining as I left the campus. I saw face, shiny faces with ecstatic smiles around me, but the young woman at the back of the big red bus in the pouring rain was not smiling. Her smile had disappeared. The words of the tutor rang in my ears for years. I was told her that I could not take the course, but masked the truth. She saw enough myself. REHAM, you must return to higher education. You have really ability. She explained, but my ability didn't matter. The education and freedom that I thought would come with getting married was to be denied. Months went by. Ejaz got quite concerned in a moment of madness. He entered me into a BBC talent search. Surprisingly, I was selected from hundreds of people and asked to come in for an audition. He drove me all the way to the audition in Cardiff, swearing the whole way as usual. There wasn't a job at the end of it. It was just a competition which would be part of a program. I ended up being shortlisted as one of the final six. However, I mentioned in the interview that my husband was based in another country and that I would not be able to stay over for recordings. Ejaz was relieved, but the whole experience only reinforced his fear that I could leave him. Within a few months, he had sold the house I had painstakingly repaired and decorated. It was a recurring theme of my life. It was a giant mortgage, and he was paranoid that he would have to give me a share. He would let these shares slip out every so often. The week after the sold out house, the UK property market boomed. The house that we had just sold was suddenly worth more than double the amount we had received for it. It was impossible not to find it funny. These little moments of black humor are all I could take from that marriage. Besides my beautiful children, beyond that was just darkness. End of chapter 5. Thank you for listening, Professor Mushtaq Shaheen. Thank you once again.